Hi, Upper Room. I recently flew to South Dakota to celebrate Thanksgiving with my family, and it shocked me when I added up the years. Libby and I haven't been able to have Thanksgiving or Christmas with our family in the Midwest in 17 years. Needless to say, it was the best Thanksgiving I have had in 17 years. I am, and always have been, a nervous flyer. I realize it has to do with my childhood. In 1989, I was 11 years old, and a non-stop United Airlines flight with almost 400 souls on board blew an engine on its way from Denver to Chicago. The pilot had to bring the plane down in Sioux City, Iowa, as the plane experienced catastrophic engine failure and they lost their hydraulic system. Sioux City, Iowa was just 2 hours from where I grew up. I felt like this plane was landing in my backyard. The pilot did his best, but when the plane touched the ground, it toppled, broke into pieces, and much of it instantly caught on fire. Miraculously, 184 people survived, but tragically, 112 people lost their lives. It remains the deadliest crash in United Airlines history. This event was on Iowa News TV almost nonstop. As an 11-year-old, I stood too close to the TV screen and I watched the plane approach and then crash over and over again. Before my feet ever left the ground, I was afraid to fly. I actually didn't fly in person until college, and I was jumpy from the start. I'm not crippled by my fear, I can just be jumpy. If I have a season where I fly a few times in short succession, I'm fine. But if I go a year or two without flying, that first flight back, I can have some nerves. In the past, I've tried everything. I've told myself all the statistics about how safe air travel is. But fear isn't always rational. And so rational arguments may help, but they don't always cure. Living out here, I see airplanes flying into Vegas almost nonstop. And there's a couple of planes that fly over my head at my house every day. While I may be a nervy flyer, I am amazed by airplanes. I am enthralled with flying. I used to teach tennis lessons outdoors in South Dakota, and every afternoon, at about the same time, F-16 fighter jets from the 114th Fighter Wing would take off, do maneuvers over our heads, and return. I can't tell you how many times I would stop what I was doing and just stare at the sky. I was lucky I didn't get hit by a stray tennis ball during those times. To this day, if I see a fighter plane in the sky, I'm stopping to stare in awe. This most recent trip to South Dakota, I made a big step in getting over my fear of flying. For some reason, I was able to look at the whole situation through a different lens. Instead of looking at my upcoming 3-hour flight as something to endure or something just to get through, I looked at it for the first time as an opportunity. To get to see my family was such a treat. And what is normally a 2-day drive, I could safely do in 3 hours. And so my experience was different. Since coming home, I'm noticing now everything that flies. I'm not just stopping in my tracks when a fighter jet goes by. I'm stopping for birds when I'm out for my walks. And I've even had a crazier thought. I wonder if I would ever get flight lessons. This is a crazy thought for a guy who grew up semi-traumatized by watching a plane crash over and over. Flying is amazing because you're taking everything you have and you're overcoming gravity. And this month, I want to encourage you to fly spiritually. Paul worded it differently. He encouraged us to run, but I think the ideas can be the same. The key verse this month is Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. I've decided that I'm going to memorize this verse. There's a multitude of tracks we could take with this verse, but because we want to fly spiritually, I think we should focus on a piece of verse 1. Let us throw off everything that hinders. The ESV says, let us throw off every weight. Another translation says, let us throw off every encumbrance. The point? We need to be set free by breaking free from things that hold us back. And so today, as we start, I want to talk about self-pity. When it comes to running a beautiful race for God, being set free to the point that it almost feels like flying, we have to break free from the encumbrance of self-pity. The heart full of self-pity cries out, woe is me. It's not fair. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Life is hard. That's reality. And I'm not saying when we go through hard things, we should pretend like everything's okay. No, in fact, when we experience pain, heartbreak, or loss, the appropriate response is to grieve. So I'm all for grief, even though it's not fun. Grief is our friend. Self-pity happens when we don't let go of our grief. Self-pity happens when we begin to keep count of all of our pain, stress, and struggles like it's a point system in a game. Self-pity happens when we start to give up and start to accept defeat. This is why I think it's so dangerous. Self-pity is the music of the defeated. And our faith is not a defeated faith, but a victorious faith. Beware of self-pity because it's got its roots in selfishness. We need to pull out all the selfishness that's trying to grow in our hearts. My family's been very busy, and then we're in South Dakota. I came home and there was one big weed growing in my backyard. We pulled it out and I thought, hey, we're doing pretty good. Time went by, and then this weekend I went to the side of my house and my son Liam was with me, and I said, Liam, what are those? My goodness, we had some exotic looking weeds growing in the middle of our side yard, a place we rarely see or visit on our property. I had no idea those wild things were growing and probably had been for several weeks, maybe even a month. We need to seek out selfishness in our hearts. When we get stuck in a pit of self-pity, that's a sign we've got some weeding to do. I love how A.W. Tozer talked about this rooting out of selfishness. I'm going to quote him here. He said, the ancient curse will not go out painlessly. The tough old miser within us will not lie down and in obedience to our command leave. He must be torn out of our heart like a plant from the soil. Selfishness must be extracted in agony and blood, like you're pulling a tooth out of the jaw. He must be expelled from our soul by violence, as Christ expelled the money changers from the temple. And we shall need to steel ourselves against his piteous begging and to recognize it as springing out of self-pity, one of the most reprehensible sins of the human heart. What a quote. Why am I focusing on self-pity today? Well, because this morning I looked ahead at a juggernaut of a workload this month. December is so busy. I'm coming off a full Sunday, and honestly, I'm tired. And so this morning, I really wanted to feel sorry for myself. Poor me, so much to do, been so busy. Poor me, I've got this stressful thing and I've got this stressful thing. Nobody knows what it feels like to carry all of these weights. I had all of these thoughts come together this morning on a walk in the brisk December air. It was a little cloudy, so the sun wasn't able to get to me as easily as I would have liked, but the clouds enabled all of the jet airplanes above me to leave white track lines in the sky as they cut through the atmosphere. I was looking down, feeling sorry for myself, and then I looked up and I saw the planes flying way above my head. And I stopped. I marveled. And then I was reminded I wasn't meant to crawl through life. I was meant to fly. Again, Paul would have said we were meant to run, but this is my upper room video and my metaphor. Most of you know that I'm a word guy, and this summer I was reading a book and the word consolation jumped off the page. Most of my life I didn't like the word consolation because I only heard it in respect to competitions. And in sports, the goal is to win the championship, not the consolation trophy. But the word consolation was used in the context of marriage. Timothy Keller was saying that this word is one of the main purposes of marriage. God gave us marriage so that a husband or a wife can console the other or give consolation. Because life is hard, we need consoling from the one God has joined us together with. What a gift to have someone there when you need them, to put their arm around you and let you know it's going to be okay, or let you know that you're going to get through this, or that at least you're not alone in your struggle. Life is hard. It takes a toll. Our hearts can take a beating. And without some consolation, we'll get depressed. Just beware. Don't let yourself over-console yourself. That's when self-pity comes into play. Let Christ be the one who gives you consolation. If I wallow in self-pity this week, the enemy can take me out of the game. But if I grieve well, if I get my consolation from the Lord, then I can be an overcomer. Are you thrashing around right now in a pit of self-pity? Throw it off and get out of there. Are you drowning in a waterfall of your own complaints? We got to break free from the gravity of this. When you're tempted to complain, pray. When you're tempted to feel sorry for yourself, give thanks. When you need to grieve, grieve as one who has hope. When you throw off the encumbrance of self-pity, then you can leave the gravity of selfishness behind and fly. The stuff in front of you this week is not something to be feared, not even just stuff to be endured. The stuff in front of you is really an opportunity. Have a great week, Upper Room.